Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's talk about WWE. Let's talk about some WWE stories. And you can see it on the screen there. This was a story yesterday that got a lot of people talking about WWE naming the greatest tag team in WWE history. Now, it must be said, before we get into all of this, because I think this is partially why WWE do these things, why anyone does lists of any kind, to be honest, is because they're subjective and they get people talking. They either spark outrage, they spark debate, they get people talking. And that's what WWE wants. That's what anyone wants when they create a list or when they start talking about the greatest ever or the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, the Mount Rushmore of WWE, the Mount Rushmore of whoever, or greatest tag team ever, greatest tag team in WWE history, greatest pro wrestler of all time. Whenever anyone does these lists, top fives, top tens, top whatever, it will always generate conversation because it is completely subjective. It's completely subjective. You don't know what criteria they're basing it on. You yourself will disagree probably with the list because let's face it, WWE named their top 50 greatest tag teams for this list of the greatest tag teams in WWE history. They named 50. And there's no way that every single person is universally going to agree on every single placing on that 50 list. They're just not. So WWE does this from time to time. They get people talking, and obviously you have to look at it from another point of view of usually whoever's under WWE contract at that time or whoever's being featured on WWE programming at that time, chances are they're going to end up high on the list as well. So that's worth thinking about as well. Now, the fifth and final episode of WWE's 50 Greatest Tag Teams is now available on Peacock and the WWE Network. Now, ironically, in another example of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, this series is hosted on the WWE Network by none other than Breezango. Yes, Tyler Breeze and Fandango, who have just been released by WWE, which obviously makes the WWE look great. Again, another example of the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. They were released from the company last week, yet they're still technically hosting shows on the network. Isn't that ironic? Now, besides the top 50 WWE tag teams, there was a segment that featured teams from WCW/the NWA and ECW. Those tag teams included the Outsiders, Doom, the Pitbulls, the Koloffs, Sting and Lex Luger, the Freebirds, Sabu and Rob Van Dam, the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, the Hollywood Blondes, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, Harlem Heat, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. So before people started to get really angry saying, well, where are, Arn and Tully, or where are the Midnight, where are the Rock and Roll? These were WWE tag teams. And I think that's worth mentioning in there. Now, obviously, Arn and Tully did compete in the WWE as the Brainbusters, etc. But I think they're looking at, established tag teams, and it's a WWE list. Let's leave it at that. It's a WWE list. Now, female tag teams were also highlighted in another segment, so they were excluded from this list. So that included the likes of the Bella Twins, the Kabuki Warriors, the Jumping Bomb Angels, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax. The fact they're on that list is laughable anyway, but I guess it's a new division. Dakota Kai and NXT Women's Champion Raquel Gonzalez, Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart, Bayley and Sasha Banks, Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, and the current Women's Tag Team Champions Natalya and Tamina Snuka. I mean, the fact that they're in the conversation. What's the greatest female tag team in WWE history? Well, Natalya and Tamina Snuka is going to be up there. You'd be laughed off. You just completely laughed off. Anyway, NXT Tag Team Champions MSK, SmackDown Tag Team Champions The Mysterios, and the Raw Tag Team Champions AJ Styles and Omos were not featured on this top 50 list. Now, I saw some people getting a bit outraged at that, but frankly, they're all new tag teams, aren't they? MSK is signed with WWE, the beginning of the year? They've been in the company 6 months. AJ Styles and Omos have only started tag teaming since WrestleMania. And the Mysterios, I mean, they've only really been tag teaming for about a year or so. So realistically, should they be on the list? Probably not. Probably not, right? That makes a lot of sense to me. So, WWE revealed that the New Day has been listed as the number one tag team in WWE history. Now, the Hardy Boys were ranked as number 2, the Hart Foundation at number 3, Edge and Christian at number 4, and the Dudley Boys at number 5. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, as is the case whenever anyone does any kind of list of any kind, especially WWE, which is always going to be slanted to whatever corporate goals they have or whatever teams they have under contract at that time. Because again, you have to look at the top 5 list they've done there. If you look at the top 5 list that they've done, the New Day, they're all under contract with WWE. The Hardys, half of them are under contract with WWE. The Hart Foundation, I mean, Bret Hart's obviously under, I guess, a Legends deal. Jim Neidhart, unfortunately, is no longer with us. Edge and Christian, one half of them is with WWE. And the Dudleys, I don't know if Devon even still is a producer. And again, Bully Ray, he might have a Legends deal. I don't know. I don't think he has a contract with WWE. So again, the New Day are the current team out of that list that are competing in WWE. Again, they're the modern team. They are what's on television right now. It benefits WWE to hype them up as the greatest tag team in WWE history. So again, you do have to look at it from the corporate point of view. But to be honest with you, as it goes, they're certainly in the conversation. I think they're absolutely, certainly in the conversation. I know that's heresy to some people that grew up during the Attitude Era or even the Ruthless Aggression Era, and they look at that and they go, no, the New Day, they're nowhere near the Dudley Boys, or they're nowhere near the Hardy Boys, they're nowhere near Edge and Christian, because when you think of tag team wrestling in WWE, obviously not in the 80s, but certainly like the 90s, late 90s, you know, you've had waves of great tag teams in WWE history. You've had, again, sort of the early 90s and late 80s of the likes of, you know, the British Bulldogs, the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, Demolition, that kind of stuff. Rhythm and Blues, you know, all those great tag teams, Money Inc. You think of that kind of wave of great tag teams in WWE, then you think of it dying off, and then you think of it sort of coming back in the late 90s with Edge and Christian, with the Dudley Boys, with the Hardy Boys, with the APA, with, you know, the list can go on. The New Age Outlaws, of course. Legion of Doom, which kind of bridged from the 80s to the late 90s. But the New Day, maybe it's just not so popular because it's in the modern era. Maybe it's not so popular of a choice because it's in the PG era and everything in the PG era is terrible, which isn't true. It's not, you know, and I really recommend to anyone when they complain about WWE booking nowadays of roll-ups, distraction finishes, or bad television, etc., go back and watch some shows from the Attitude Era. They are far and away better than today, but it's not because of the booking. That's important to say. It's not because of the booking. The Attitude Era isn't better because of the booking. The booking is largely the same than it is today. WWE gets, you know, the big decisions in the Attitude Era, WWE tended to get right. They get it wrong nowadays. But, you know, the booking and the finishes are largely the same. They really are. It's this intangible quality that separates the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era from today. In the PG era, is that just, you know, when you're watching a show, you don't feel like anything can really happen anymore. There isn't that energy, and I mean this even prior to the pandemic. There isn't that energy, and, you know, it just feels just like a real great program. The pacing of the Attitude Era shows is so quick. They rattle off so fast. And nowadays it doesn't really happen like that. But the New Day, if you're going to look at it in the modern era, absolutely they're a bright spot in the modern era. And they're no doubt, then they are absolutely no doubt in the conversation to be up there as one of the greatest tag teams in WWE history. Are they the greatest? That's subjective. That isn't really for me to say, I don't think. But they're certainly in that conversation. I think you have to put them up there with the Hardy Boys. You have to put them up there with Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know if we're necessarily going to count tag team reigns because that's so, you know, that changes, and WWE is so flippant on flipping titles back and forth and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that's really a fair assumption and a way to, you know, to compare these teams, but absolutely. New Day are in the company with the likes of, you know, the Hardys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, the Hart Foundation, etc. They're absolutely in that conversation. So I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's the most egregious list in the world. Again, lists are subjective anyway, and I don't put too much stock into them. I read a lot of lists online and articles online talking about top 5 this, top 10 that, my favorite this, my favorite that. And again, it's all subjective. It's all subjective, and everyone has their own separate opinion, and that's great. Sometimes the good thing about things like this is that it sparks conversation, constructive conversation. The only issue is sometimes when people just get so angry and outraged over a list, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, but if you want to open up the discussion, absolutely the New Day are in that conversation. Are they the best? I don't know. Who it's not as definitive, and especially as time goes on and more tag teams appear, that whole argument gets far more diluted because there's far more teams and it gets far more subjective. But the New Day, absolutely, one of the greatest tag teams in WWE history. There is no doubt about that. There really is no doubt about that. And considering their story of a gimmick that they had to pitch hard for, they got to work together in the end. And Vince McMahon had his vision of them being, you know, positivity and essentially being like a gospel choir kind of ridiculousness. And then eventually, over time, that didn't work, and they were just allowed to be themselves. And wouldn't you know it, they've become to be one of the most popular acts in recent WWE history. Certainly have made that company a lot of money through merchandising and you name it. They are a very, very successful brand within WWE. So absolutely, they're right at the top of that list. There's no doubt about that. Otis, the makeover or metamorphosis of Otis continues. This week's on WWE's The Bump, the new and improved Alpha Academy member Otis returned to the show to discuss his new look that many have been talking about since the beginning of this, or I guess last month now, considering today's July 1st. But Otis has since changed his look again by updating his hairstyle. Now, Kayla Braxton asked Otis what inspired him to change the fun-loving guy with long hair and a beard to a more clean-shaved and vicious competitor. For Otis, he says his transformation is trying to convey how serious he is as a tag team competitor. In other words, Otis wants to have the look, while also have the acknowledgement as a top contender for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship. Well, of course, that's all kayfabe. The real reason is that Vince McMahon, once again, is tinkering, pal. Oh, we couldn't get you over last year in Money in the Bank, and there's just something missing. We gotta change you. We gotta change you. If it's not your entrance music, maybe you need to shave your beard. Maybe that will get you over. If it's not your beard, maybe it's your hair. Your long hair's holding you back. All right, let's just cut your hair. Let's try something different. Maybe, just maybe, it's bad booking and it's a lack of creativity. Maybe that's the problem. Now, it's fascinating to me because, of course, Money in the Bank's only a couple of weeks away. And 12 months ago, Otis... It's crazy to think about now, but it's true. 12 months ago, Otis was one of the more popular acts on SmackDown. I know looking back on it now, it's really easy to say Otis being given the Money in the Bank contract, that was a bad idea. That was a bad idea, and he shouldn't have got the Money in the Bank contract, but that's with the benefit of hindsight. That's really easy to say now. If you go back 12 months, if you can go back in time, there was an argument to be made. There was an argument to be made that Otis should have won the Money in the Bank contract. He was a popular guy. He was coming off of that storyline with Mandy Rose and Dolph Ziggler at WrestleMania. That was a hit. The fans were behind it prior to the pandemic and prior to everything being shut down and being moved to the Performance Center. Otis was very popular. And the storyline with Mandy Rose was getting great crowd reactions. It was getting great traction on social media. When he was having his tag team matches as part of Heavy Machinery, when he got the hot tag, the place went crazy. And he's got a totally unique look. You know, even back then with the long hair and the beard, and he's a bigger guy, but he's got a ton of personality, a ton of charisma. He was genuinely funny until, like WWE does with anything that's genuinely funny, they run it into the ground because they see a bit of humor and they're like, oh my gosh, someone's funny. I think about the Dean Ambrose quote that he said before when he said, the moment they knew I had a shred of comedic timing, that's it, you're over. Because now you're a comedy guy, you're goofy now, because they know you can do it. And that was almost part of the problem, I guess, for Otis. And Otis is just one of the people in a long line of people. He's hardly the first, he won't be the last, of people that Vince McMahon has a fascination with. He likes them, he pushes them. And then eventually he just goes, oh, it's not working. It's not working. So there was an argument to be made last year that Otis should have won Money in the Bank. And it wasn't the craziest thing in the world. Again, you have to look at these things in context. Again, this time last year, we're in the middle of the pandemic. They're at the Performance Center. That Money in the Bank ladder match was the corporate Money in the Bank ladder match, that cinematic presentation. And SmackDown was really hurt at that period of time. It had no Roman Reigns, who at the time was a babyface. I guess even in his absence, he was a babyface. They had Braun Strowman as the Universal Champion. An ice-cold Braun Strowman, by the way, winning the Universal Championship at WrestleMania. He had no momentum, no steam, ironically, choo-choo, behind him. He had no steam behind him. SmackDown was suffering. They had no top babyfaces on that brand. They arguably still don't, but they've got bigger stars than that show right now. They were so suffering. Jeff Hardy was arguably the top babyface on that show. And look where he is on Raw right now. So the idea of Otis winning the Money in the Bank and WWE trying to make something of him, again, with his popularity prior to the pandemic, that wasn't the most silly idea in the world. And for whatever reason, it didn't work. The reason you can argue that it didn't work is because winning the Money in the Bank's one thing, but you still have to have the consistent booking afterwards. And he never had that. He just never had that. His booking afterwards was still silly, still goofy. They turned it into a lunchbox and they took away his tag team partner and he was just left in limbo. And then by the time that Roman Reigns came back, and Roman Reigns ain't dropping the Universal Championship anytime soon because he shouldn't, Otis was dead in the water. He was absolutely dead in the water. And by that point, it became a farce that he was going to be the Money in the Bank holder, or that he could be a world champion. Now, if they'd have done this metamorphosis whilst he was holding the Money in the Bank briefcase, who knows what could have happened? Who knows? Realistically, he could have just gone over to Raw. Who cares? I mean, it's not as if WWE really tries to enforce Raw and SmackDown that much. He could have done the brand-to-brand invitational, and he could have done something. I don't know. There would have been options, but look, WWE decided that it wasn't working. They switched it to The Miz, and I'm glad that The Miz got his moment, but I don't know, is Otis cutting his hair and shaving his beard, is that going to transforming into what WWE had imagined for him? I don't know. Unfortunately, history would suggest that maybe the damage has been done, but time will tell. Time will tell when it comes to all that. Now, as I mentioned, WWE is returning to touring soon, and this past week, Sasha Banks and others was at the Performance Center training ahead of their return to touring. It was a busy week at the Performance Center this week. Of course, Vince McMahon is scheduled to visit and scout talent today, while several main roster wrestlers are mandated to be there for training as company prepares to return to touring. It was noted before how Vince is scheduled to be at the Performance Center to scout talent as the company makes a significant effort to replenish the main roster. But now Fightful Select is reporting there are a lot of main roster wrestlers at the Performance Center this week as well. It was noted that many wrestlers that have been off of television for quite a while made the trip to the Performance Center yesterday. That includes Sasha Banks. Banks has not been seen on television since dropping the SmackDown Women's Championship to Bianca Belair at WrestleMania 37 in April. It was also reported that wrestlers who have asked for time off were not exempt from being away at the Performance Center for training this week. So I guess talent's got to get their reps in as they return to touring. So the return to touring is fully on, and it's all hands on deck. Everyone's been at the Performance Center this week. Happy Corbin, Baron Corbin, King Corbin, whatever you want to call him, looks to be undergoing a character change recently. But he certainly, by all accounts, according to our new reports, is one of the most beloved characters backstage. Now, in a recent episode of Figure 4 Online's We're Live Pal, featuring Denise Salcedo, Garrett Gonzalez, and the Matman podcast Andrew Zarian, Baron Corbin was one of the names discussed. Zarian provided a fascinating update about how the former King of the Ring is viewed backstage in the company. Now, Baron Corbin seems to have a secure spot on television as he's been featured extensively throughout the year, and Zarian revealed that Corbin is reportedly beloved within WWE. While a fan reaction would suggest otherwise, Corbin is one of the most pleasant people behind the scenes. A former WWE writer told Zarian that working with Baron Corbin was a smooth experience as the former United States champion is, quote, not combative, and has a very cooperative attitude. This is what he had to say, quote, Baron Corbin is beloved in that company, maybe not by the fans, but I can tell you from a former writer one time told me that he's one of the most pleasant people to work with because he will not be combative and he works with you on stuff. And us as fans, we look at this and we're like, another Baron Corbin match, but his heat was so negative where it's now turned into normal heat in a weird way. As I mentioned, Baron Corbin looks to be undergoing a gimmick change soon. They've recently trademarked the term Happy Corbin, so it looks like Baron Corbin will be undergoing a name change, which the Happy Corbin thing sounds horrible, by the way. But that's not the first time we've heard this. We've heard this a couple of times that Baron Corbin's very well liked, and the Baron Corbin, they can talk about the Baron Corbin, he had such negative heat and such negative crowd reaction. I don't think that had anything ever to do with Baron Corbin the guy or Baron Corbin the wrestler. I don't think there's any doubt to say Baron Corbin is not a good wrestler. He's a very good wrestler. I think everyone would probably acknowledge that. Again, the heat isn't direct. This is how crazy pro wrestling is nowadays. Because it was the same with Roman Reigns. It's the same with Baron Corbin. It's the same for a lot of people over the course of the last 10 years or so. Is that negative reaction, that groan and all that kind of stuff, that isn't directed towards Baron Corbin. That's directed to the writing team. That's directed to Vince McMahon. That's directed to Bruce Pritchard. The reason people didn't like Baron Corbin is because the King character sucked. And the King character is so outdated, and you wanted to see something new and something different. How many times have we seen someone win the King of the Ring, and then suddenly, well, I'm a king now, I have to wear a crown, I have a cape, I walk around with a scepter, and I call myself a king. Why? Because it's 1985, and I carry on doing that. Especially when in the late 90s, in the Attitude Era, they dropped all of that. They still did the King of the Ring tournament, but if you won, you were just the best. You won a trophy. That was it. Or if you're Brock Lesnar, you got a shot at SummerSlam, which I'd like to see that return. That made sense. Nobody complained about that. Nobody, because it was a good concept. It was a good storyline, and it wasn't outdated. If that concept was dated in the late 90s about walking around with a crown and a scepter and all that kind of stuff, what does that mean for 2021? You know, that's where the heat for King Corbin's truly come from. The only guy that's been able to pull it off is King Booker. And maybe at the time that's because it was a throwback or because he was so over the top. I don't know. But they tried it with King Sheamus. They tried it with King Barrett. Now they've tried it with King Corbin. Enough. I know they're talking about bringing back the King of the Ring concept. Shinsuke Nakamura wearing the crown is fine. But still, it's just enough. If you're going to bring back the King of the Ring concept, make it mean something again. Do the thing you did in 2002. You win the King of the Ring, you're the best, you get a shot at the World Championship at the next pay-per-view. That makes sense. That makes sense, and it means more to the King of the Ring, far more than wearing a crown does. That's the issue. Bronson Reed, of course, dropped the NXT North American Championship this past week on NXT, and there's been a lot of rumors about him heading to the main roster very soon. Of course, he recently competed in dark matches, appeared on main event, defeating Drew Gulak, and Bronson Reed said he's open to a main roster call-up, but feels like he would do better on SmackDown. I wonder why. Maybe because that's the bigger show with more viewers. As I mentioned, he recently lost the NXT North American Championship to Isaiah Swerve Scott this past week on NXT. But he spoke with Al Brunch, the WWE, before the show and talked about a possible call-up. He said, quote, "I feel great. I think it's another opportunity to get more eyes on the colossal Bronson Reed. So I got to wrestle Drew Gulak and I hit my tsunami splash. I beat him 1-2-3. So feeling very happy about it." Now, Reed says he does not know when he will join the roster full time. He said he's happy to remain in NXT, but if the powers that be have me on Raw or SmackDown, I'm happy to show up and keep hitting that tsunami splash on him as many times as possible. Now, when asked which brand he think he would better suit him, he said, quote, "That's a tough choice. I think both Raw and SmackDown have benefits, but if I had to choose, if I had to leave the black and gold NXT, I'd probably say the blue brand. I would say Friday Night SmackDown." Again, I wonder why. Maybe because it's on Fox. Maybe because it's got more viewers than any other WWE show. Maybe because it's got the biggest stars on that show, whether it's Roman Reigns, Edge, Seth Rollins, the list can go on and on, soon to be John Cena. I'm pretty sure I would want to go on SmackDown. I certainly wouldn't want to go to Raw, which is a dumpster fire. I wouldn't want to be on Raw, which is 3 hours every Monday night, and the script gets torn up about 12 times during the show. Why on earth would you want to go there? So I don't think he's silly on that one. Big E recently did an interview. This is interesting. And he said that he feels like he's lost momentum since WrestleMania. And he's not wrong. He really, really isn't wrong. He spoke about, losing momentum since WrestleMania. And I won't read the quote because it's quite long. But he said, I think I've lost momentum since WrestleMania and I've kind of stagnated and slowed down. Duh. Yes. Do you know why? Because he had his feud with Apollo Crews. He dropped the championship, fine. And then he was going to have a feud with Aleister Black. Aleister Black returns, hits him with Black Mass. And then Aleister Black, if you're just going to believe kayfabe, just disappeared and decided to never come back again. That's a good way to stop momentum. That's certainly a good way to stop momentum. So I don't blame him for feeling like his momentum stopped. I think as a fan, I feel like it stopped as well. It slowed down significantly. Like someone being fired, essentially, which I thought that was an interesting story. Burger King and WWE. There's been a lot of Burger King references on WWE television recently when it comes to Riddle. And the fast food chain appears to be a fan of the ongoing storyline between Randy Orton and Matt Riddle on Monday Night Raw. Now, Riddle has mentioned Burger King and their signature sandwich, the Whopper, in several recent promos on Raw, including in a backstage segment with Damian Priest on this past week's show. Now, it looks like Riddle likes to keep a stash handy, a stash of Whoppers. Riddle and Priest visited a nearby Burger King restaurant yesterday afternoon, and Riddle tweeted about it, plugging the new King sandwich. He also thanked Priest for lunch. Now, Burger King responded to this tweet and said, "This is the best storyline in wrestling." So, I don't know about that, but certainly it's probably the best thing on Raw right now. The Riddle RK Bro storyline, very good. So, I agree with Burger King, even though I'm going to be honest, this might shock you, not the biggest Burger King fan. Just that's not my deal. I'm more of a KFC guy, if I'm going to be honest with you. Finally, we have a trailer for the upcoming WWE Icons documentary on Lex Luger. The new WWE Icons documentary on the legendary Lex Luger will premiere on Peacock and on WWE Network on Sunday, July 4th. The doc will feature new interview footage with Luger and several Hall of Famers, legends including Sting, Bret Hart, Ric Flair, Jim Cornette, Bruce Pritchard, amongst others. The episode will cover everything from Luger's career to his legal troubles, his addiction, and apparently the tragic 2003 passing of Miss Elizabeth. A new episode of Icons Revisited will also premiere this Sunday to accompany the Luger documentary. The episode will be hosted by Matt Camp and Ryan Popola of The Bump and feature more interviews with the likes of Flair, Hart, amongst others. The trailer for Luger's Icon episode can be seen on social media. And Bruce Pritchard in it is recalling how WWE Chairman and CEO came up with Luger's narcissist gimmick. He said Vince came up with this and said he's the narcissist. Cornette said Vince saw Luger as someone huge for the company, the next version of Hulk Hogan. He said, quote, that was a good use for Lex, but Vince saw him as the next Hulk Hogan. So it certainly is very, very interesting. It's very interesting. Luger's seen in the trailer saying, you know that old saying, too much time, too much money? That's kind of the devil's workshop that definitely manifested in my life. Now, Sting's also in there as well. He's one of Lex Luger's closest friends. Said alcohol, pills cause us to make all the wrong choices. Luger also said it's a miracle that he's alive today. He said to be sitting here in front of this camera talking to you, it's just absolutely a miracle of God, Luger says at the end of the trailer. So the WWE Icons series so far, whether it was Yokozuna, Beth Phoenix, whoever they did it on, Rob Van Dam, they've all been really, really good. Real good high production quality. It's arguably the best thing WWE does nowadays. The WWE documentaries they do are so good. They're fantastic. And I have no doubt that this is going to be just the same. I thought the Yokozuna documentary is right up there, one of the best documentaries they've ever done. I thought it was superb. So I have high expectations for this one about Lex Luger, and we'll probably talk about it here on the channel as well. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all of the WWE news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Gut the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.